My favorite type of employee, my absolute favorite, is when they come into my office and they bring me a stack of paper and they're like, "Look, I just printed this whole thing wrong. I don't know how I let this happen, but I figured out a system to prevent it in the future and it's never going to happen again." I literally want to high five this employee. Did it just cost us a bunch of money? Sure. But the person that holds themselves accountable, you don't need to come down on them.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Reflect Forward. I'm your host, Kerry Siggins, and I'm so glad you are here today. Today, my guest is Kyle Ewing, who is the founder and CEO of TerraSlate, which is a manufacturing company that produces waterproof and rip-proof paper used by the U.S. military, biotech firms, hospitality companies, the NFL. It is a boring business, as Kyle will tell you, that he has scaled into something really cool. And I just absolutely adore this man. He is such a great human being. He is gritty, he is honest, he is real, and he cares so much about building a great company and great culture. So, as you can imagine, we just hit it off. So, I am really excited for you to meet him. So, hang tight, and I'll be right back with Kyle. All right, everyone, I am back with Kyle Ewing. I'm so excited for this interview. We are going to have such a great time. Kyle, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thanks for having me on the show. Big fan.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Well, I love your story. I love that you have turned what you call a boring product into a multi-million-dollar business. So, can you tell us a little bit about what you do, a little bit about who you are, and this idea of turning something boring into a really cool business?
My primary company, TerraSlate Waterproof Paper, makes exactly that. We manufacture and print waterproof paper for all different types of industries. And if you're listening to this show, you've probably held the product in the last week. You would just not have known it. So we make everything from restaurant menus to price tags at grocery stores, and then specialty things like the escape pod manuals for nuclear submarines. It's in all the Coast Guard ships and the combat jets. And then we make a couple fun things like the play charts for the NFL. So when you see the coach call the play on the sideline and they cover their mouth, that's typically a piece of our waterproof paper.
Tell us a little bit more about how you got started because it's a really interesting story.
The thing I was trying to do is figure out how to make passports out of waterproof paper because my passport had gotten wet at some point, and that was then always a challenge when I would try to cross a border. They would say, "What happened to your passport?" And I would say, "Well, it got wet," but it's still a valid passport. So I don't know why that was an issue. But that gave me the idea I need to make waterproof paper that can be printed on, that's foldable, that's flexible, that you can staple because that's how passports used to be bound and that retains its waterproof characteristics. So lamination doesn't work. And the other thing about lamination is it's not recyclable. Basically, you're taking two pieces of plastic with a sheet of regular paper in the middle and then you're making a sandwich. And because there's no cost efficient way to separate those, you can't recycle it. It's just trash.
And so now you're into a lot of other things besides just passports. In fact, I don't even know if you do passports anymore, right? But I think you got your start working with the local restaurant. So can you tell us a little bit about how you made that transition of, hey, no one's buying passport paper. I need to figure out how to pivot here.
Absolutely. Yeah. My first run of paper was like 100,000 sheets. That was the minimum order that I could do. And the problem was I was selling basically a few sheets a week, and my payback was 200 plus years. So the question then was, how do I pivot this business? And
Yeah.
from going into the local taco bar by where we used to live, my wife and I became friends with the owner and we would chit chat here and there. Super nice guy. And one day he was like, "Can you print my menus on this material?" And I said, "I don't know." And he said, "Well, here's a thumb drive. Take it home, print some, bring them back tomorrow, and we'll try them out." A week later, I came back and I said, "Hey, how are they?" He said, "These are literally the best menus we've ever had. Reviews are up, sales are up. It's leveled up the restaurant. I want to increase our prices because all of a sudden now we have so many bookings, we can't take everybody. So we're going to use this opportunity to make a price raise. And then, oh, by the way, I have several other restaurants. How quickly can you do those?" And so that was our entree into the world of restaurants, which we absolutely love.
Such a cool story. Are restaurants still a big portion of your business?
Definitely. Restaurants are some of our favorite customers and one of our biggest business divisions. And we love them because they're wonderful people. They serve food for a living, right? So these are the people that I love talking to. But then for the business, it's profitable for us because we can sell both the paper and the print job. And then restaurants typically will change their menu every month or 3 months or 6 months or whatever their cadence is. So we get that resale, and I wouldn't call it recurring revenue, but when we do a great job, they tend to come back. The lifetime value of a customer is very high for us. And we protect that fiercely by offering definitely the highest quality products and a 1 day turnaround, which the restaurant industry depends on. Because if they order food and it's in their fridges, it's literally starting to go bad the second it arrives. It has an expiration. So if they want to add a new dish to the menu, they order the food. They've got to have those menus that exact day. Otherwise, their food costs start going up because they have spoiled.
So, did you know anything about paper? Were you an entrepreneur? Did you have other companies before this? How did you get started?
I didn't know anything about paper other than how to make a decent paper airplane, um, which haphazardly, I met a guy recently who was the world champion paper airplane thrower. Hilarious guy. But separately, I got my start as a management consultant. And then at one point, that company decided to roll up its regional offices. And I was in one of those to their central location in Chicago. My wife and I had just gotten engaged and she had passed the bar in Denver. So I didn't want to move us out of the state of Colorado and go to Illinois. So we decided to stay. I decided to go out on my own. And my personal Independence Day was 9/9. I always remember that day. And I cheers my wife on that day because that was the day I left the corporate world to work for myself. I thought I would be eating cereal and flying around in a private jet and sleeping in and all the good things about being an entrepreneurship that you typically hear about. As you probably know, that's exactly the opposite of what happened. I felt like I had never worked so hard for so little or basically nothing and started a company called Gorilla Tags ID Systems. And we made ID tags for runners and hikers and athletes, cyclists, things like that, that would tell people if you got hurt, who you are, who to call, and how to treat you. We made a successful exit from that. And I started TerraSlate a little bit later.
So, you didn't know much about paper and how to put this film on paper. Did you surround yourself with experts? How did you get started and figure out how to make this waterproof paper?
It was a challenge because I just tried to buy the paper initially
Yeah.
and I found Tyvek, which we've all seen on the side of a house. But the problem is Tyvek is not heat resistant and you can't print it with a laser printer because it will melt. And so I started calling around and I said, who do you know that's a chemical engineer? And people would say, dude, I don't know anyone like that. Call my Uncle Bob or whoever, talk to him. He might know somebody. So I just started calling around. It took me probably 30 calls to get to somebody that was a chemical engineer who finally said, I don't think you can do this, but I do know a firm that might be willing to take your money if you want to give it a shot, but I'm not guaranteeing any results. So I called them and they said the same thing. We're not sure if this is a practical application. We're not sure if this will even work. And we honestly don't think there's any market for this. So you're going to have to pay for this development because we're not going to make any money past that. Eventually, they did come back on that. They did help me develop it. They didn't charge me what they said they would. And it took about 10 iterations in a full calendar year, but we got there.
It's so amazing. And I love this because it's just like the grittiness of entrepreneurship. How do you view yourself in this context of grittiness? And what kept you going when things were tough, right? I mean, I think you said you had those 100,000 sheets of paper in your living room or something like that. And your wife is like, what are we doing here? Can you talk about how grit kept you going?
Yeah, and I love that you brought up grit because at TerraSlate, grit is our number one core value. I don't care if you're good at something. I just care if you're willing to try hard because you can get good. You can learn pretty much anything if you want to, but I can't bring out that grit in you. That has to come from you. I can be motivational, I can give you all the tools, but grit was instilled in me by an athletic coach a long time ago. I feel like when I have a task, I want to pursue it with everything in me, and I'm willing to go to the end of the world to figure it out or until I literally hit a brick wall and I can't go further. So people always ask, like, why did you think this would work? Like, paper is a dying industry. Who would want to start a paper company in a digital world? And I couldn't agree more, right? As an investor now, hey, I'm not sure this is the right path, but it's a balance between grit and staying the course and knowing when to pivot or when to pull back because you are just off track. And so that's a tough balance. I usually lean towards keep trying because if it was easy, somebody else would have done it and you wouldn't have that opportunity. So if you think there's an opportunity, you may have to push further than you want to or than you originally thought you would have. But sometimes you're so far in, you're like, well, what's another couple months of trying at this point?
Maybe talk a little bit about how you learned to sell because you're trying to sell somebody something that they didn't even know that they needed. So, how did you get through building out a customer base from nothing to what you are today?
Sales is one of my favorite things. And it wasn't initially, but I saw something that you're 2,000 cold calls away from success. And I was like, I'm unemployed. I got nothing else to do. And so I thought, okay, here's my plan. I'm going to sell for 1 hour a day and I'm gonna dial for dollars until that hour's up, and I don't care if it goes well or doesn't go well. A friend of mine named John, he was like, "This is what you should do." It was difficult, right? Like, people hang up in my face. I'm a cold caller, right? He didn't like that. And then over time, after I switched from 1 hour a day to 1 cell phone battery a day to 1 cell phone battery in the morning and 1 in the afternoon, charge it during lunch, was that I need to play a character that people wanna talk to. And so the character that I still play today when I'm gonna do a sales call is your best friend and I'm calling you with good news. Because who doesn't want to take that call? Like, I want this to be the kind of relationship where when I call them back again later, they're like, I had fun talking to him. I'll take that call, either consciously or subconsciously. So I try to be really friendly. I don't go for the hard close. I do relationship based selling and I try to let people buy from me as much as they're buying from the product. So I give everybody my cell phone number. I give them my personal email. I answer calls, emails, and texts after hours because that's literally what it took to get people to trust me with their money and try the product.
Just that consistency, showing up. Number one thing is you just have to say, I'm going to show up and do it consistently and be committed to the process because it is a process and it always goes slower than what we want. And that's why that commitment is just such an important piece. So, what's your relationship with showing up? You had a customer tell you to F off and die one time, right? So, you got to keep showing up after that.
That's one of the hardest things. Like, I used to do a lot of door-to-door selling. I was on this, like, cheap flights list because I wanted to sell more and I needed to get outside of Denver because I'd sold to every restaurant in the Denver area. I would just hop, like, afternoon flights for $29 to Albuquerque or anywhere, like Detroit, LA, didn't matter, and I would go there and I would find, like, whatever's the closest main street to the airport, Uber there, and then with my briefcase full of sample packs, I would just walk into every restaurant on one side of Main Street, talk to all the general managers or anybody that would listen, go across the street and go back down the other side. And honestly, it worked really well, but 5% of people are going to be grumpy at you. I mean, literally, a guy in Laguna Beach, I still know his name, and maybe I came in at the lunch hour and I could have timed that a little better, but I was trying to hit my number. He was like, I'm in the middle of my lunch hour. I want you to turn around and fuck off and die. And I was like, wow, got it. I think there's lovers and fighters in the world. Everybody's a lover, but I'm also a fighter. So I'm like, I want to give it to this guy. I want to tell him what I think of that. And I was like, you know what? That's not actually going to help me make this sale or the next sale if I get all wound up. So I was just like, got it. I turned around and left and called my wife afterwards. And I was like, hey, I can only talk for a second because I have to go make my next sale or I'm not going to go if I don't do it right away. But listen to what just happened. And she was like, in Laguna Beach?
Oh, well, I think it just continues to show the example of grit because you took this idea, turned it into a scrappy startup, and now you've scaled it. So that's really cool. What have you learned about your leadership and how has it changed since you started the scrappy company based on this kind of crazy idea into what it is now?
I used to lead from the front. And I would say that I still do, but I have adapted my style. I used to think it's critically important for me to show every employee how hard I'm working and that I'm willing to pick up the trash, take it out, clean the toilets, do the hard work, talk to the customer that nobody wants to talk to, fix the machine, whatever it is. That allowed the business to grow to about 5 million in sales. But the problem is I became that bottleneck because the business was too reliant on one person. And then I wasn't able to travel. I wasn't able to go to conferences or do sales because the business would stumble when I left because it was so reliant on me being there to fix the machine or help out with production or X, Y, and Z. And so I thought leading from the front meant those things. And to an extent, I would say that it does. But what I've learned since and what allowed us to go from like the first 5 million in sales to 40 million in sales is learning how to delegate the authority, teach people, and then have them do it. And the truth is, that's hard for entrepreneurs, right? Because at first, they've never done this before. So, of course, they're not going to be as good at doing something new that you've been doing for however many years. Having patience and humility and coaching them and teaching them and letting them make mistakes is such a key part. And it sounds so easy, but I just can't emphasize that enough that when you hand off a task, You have to know it's going to go wrong at some point, and you have to just be there to support the person and help them put it back together. The nice thing for me is we don't make life-saving equipment. We don't transplant organs. No one dies because their print order didn't get there. Like it can be pretty frustrating. It can be expensive for us and for them, but nobody dies. And my favorite type of employee, my absolute favorite, is when they come into my office and they bring me a stack of paper and they're like, look, I just printed this whole thing wrong. I don't know how I let this happen, but I figured out a system to prevent it in the future and it's never going to happen again. I literally want to high five this employee. Did it just cost us a bunch of money? Sure. But the person that holds themselves accountable, you don't need to come down on them. You almost want to high five them and say, I can't believe you did this. That's incredible. Great job. Let's move on to the next one. It's like getting told to F off and die at the restaurant. We made a mistake, but we've obviously already learned. We're ready to move on. You're good. It's the person that hides the mistakes, sweeps it under the rug, and hopes you don't notice that you have to be more concerned about. Because what'll happen is if you approach them, hey, you know, what happened here? Everything will be something else or someone else's fault, and they will become incredibly defensive. And that is what you need to worry about more than the person that brings it to you, because they're not taking responsibility. The person that does take responsibility will say, I've made this mistake. Here's how I'm going to make sure it never happens again. Or I made this mistake. Can you help me figure out how to make sure it never happens again? And that difference can really help you determine who your A players are and who you can build a business around.
This is the whole premise of the ownership mindset, right? And the book that I wrote is this idea that you are responsible for everything that happens in your life. And yes, you want those kinds of employees, but think about how many people would get reprimanded for something like that, get shamed for something like that. And so we're conditioned in so many ways to hide things. You have to really, as a leader, create that safe space for a person to say, I screwed up, and I also figured out a solution to make sure that I don't screw up again. The culture that cultivates that kind of responsibility, it's just so few and far between. And when you can hire people who have that responsibility mindset, that accountability mindset, you can do so many great things, because the goal is never to be perfect. We're not
Yeah.
perfect. Like, we learn from our mistakes. And if we're not making mistakes, we're not pushing ourselves to learn, even if it is a mindless mistake, right? We need to be able to learn from those mistakes and create that kind of environment where we can grow because of those mistakes, in spite of those mistakes, not trying to hide them.
I love that you talk about ownership mindset in your book, because for me at my business, when a customer calls and complains, I do the opposite of what management consultants used to do in the early 2000s. And what they do is the partner never takes the heat. They always say, okay, who's at the bottom of the totem pole? You take the heat, because the partner wants to save face. And I did that for several years and I hated it, because sometimes I would have to own a mistake. I didn't even work on the project, right? I have to apologize to the customer. I literally don't even know what we're talking about. And so at my company, we flipped that. And so what I tell the customer is, it's my company. I 100% own this mistake. Let me figure out what we can do to make this right.
Yeah.
Because it
Yep.
doesn't help to burn your employee. It's never the right
Never.
thing to do. The typical
No.
pyramid in the 50s, like everybody works for the guy at the top, right? Pyramid structure. The problem is it doesn't work in 2025. So we flipped that pyramid upside down. And what I tell my employees is, I work for you and you work for the customer. So every day when I'm in the office, I talk to every single person. And the question I ask every single day is, what can I do for you? How can I make your job easier? What roadblock can I remove for you? Because that's literally the only way to earn their trust and take care of them and let them know that I truly work for you. Like, you think you work for me, but that's never going to be how this relationship is. My job is to make sure your job is easy and as realistic to do a great job as possible. And I want to enable them with that. And once you have that mindset shift, all of a sudden the culture at the company will totally change.
I love that. The buck always stops with the leader. You don't have to blame yourself, but you have to take responsibility. And I think that there's such a key difference with that. I think a lot of leaders might beat themselves up and be like, oh, this is my fault because my employee made this mistake. No, it's not your fault. Mistakes happen, but you are still responsible for it, because the buck stops with you as a leader. And I love how you've shifted that thinking around, I work for you, you work for the customer. Let's figure this out together. I can imagine that it creates a lot more psychological safety within your organization when people know that you have their back, even when things go wrong, or especially when things go wrong.
I think that's it. And I would love to add on to that a piece that any business owner or leader or manager should do, right? Say one of your people is on the phone with a customer and the customer is just giving him the business, like everything's
Mm.
bad and it's your fault, tell that team member, I want you to transfer that call upstairs right away.
Yeah.
Nobody in the world gets paid enough to listen to that. But as the owner of the company, or if you want to be the manager or the general manager, you want to level up, take that call right away. Because what you don't need is your own guys and girls in the bathroom crying because somebody just told them to F off and die.
Yeah.
Not cool. And what that person, that customer that's on the phone, what they need is they need to be heard and they feel like they need to be heard by somebody higher up. So I say, hey, it's Kyle. I'm the owner of the company. How can I help? And sometimes that's all I have to say to get them from level 11 back down to an under 5, maybe a 3 or 4, where we can have a discussion. Because when they're boiling over at 10 or 11, there's no progress to be made. Nobody can help them in that situation. They can't be helped. But if you take that call, transfer it to yourself and say, Here's who I am. How can I help you? I want to make sure this is right." You have the authority to make any exception in the world that you need to, or that you see fit. Or if you don't want to make an exception, they've at least talked as high as they can up in the organization. And by doing this, letting your team know you always have their back. And when they make a mistake, you will never burn them. You will always own it. You're giving them license to be great people, and great people treat the customers well. And honestly, that's what we're all trying to do.
Speaking of mistakes, what's the biggest mistake you've made, and how did making that mistake change how you approach your business or how you lead?
Great question. The mistake that I've made traditionally in the past more than one time is not hiring soon enough and not hiring at the level or the pay that I needed to really bring the right person in to facilitate the growth or to support the growth of the company. I'm thrifty when it comes to business. And so I'm trying to figure out, like, how can we do more with less? I want to pay my people as much as possible, but I can't do that if I'm giving away money everywhere. And I can't afford to make a miss. When I was a small company, if you hire somebody that you can't afford and they don't deliver, you could sink the company, right? It was difficult, but I took it on myself and I think that was wrong. So what I should have done and try to do now looking forward is hire the best person possible in that role and figure out how to pay them. And then we hire slowly and we fire quickly. So if we're not getting value in the first couple of months, we're going to have to make a change. It's one of the hardest parts of management for me is letting people go because I become personally invested in their lives and their success. I root for people, even when maybe I shouldn't. I want them to succeed. It's really helpful to avoid that if you can get the right person first. Spend the money to get the person that can do a great job because you can pay people above market rate if they're A players because you're still going to get a 5 or a 10x return on that salary.
Yeah, I think most leaders, most managers can relate to that. We've all made those same mistakes, and definitely hanging on to poor or even mediocre performers way too long because we are invested in them as human beings, even if they're not right for the team.
Exactly. I have
Hmm.
been fired. And what I know from that is that it doesn't matter how high or not you are at a company. When you get fired, it changes your life, right? Now
Yeah.
you can react to that in a couple of different ways, but it is a milestone in your life. And I don't like doing that. It's so important to try to get the right person in the right seat, but probably the hardest part of
Yeah.
business.
Why did you get fired? And what was that like? And what did you learn? What did you do differently now because of that firing?
Oh man, yeah, I was a management consultant and I was putting together a financial forecast for a major operator in the cable and broadband industry. And they had launched this new home security product that they thought would take them from here to the moon in terms of profitability. And we ran a couple tests in some specific cities, and the acceptance rate or the take rate on the product was just really low. And the quality of the product, I would say, isn't something that's going to get you to the moon. Will some people buy it? Yes. Is it decent? Yes. But is it like the level of an Apple or a Samsung product? Not even close. And so my forecast was that this is going to have a very small incremental increase in sales, basically negligible. What that meant is that it'll go to Wall Street and then the company won't invest in our consulting firm to help them roll this out in all the other markets. Because if the forecast is bad and it's going to be a bust, they're going to save the money. And that will cost my company a lot. One of the partners said to me, I need you to adjust the forecast. And I drew a line in the sand and I said, from where I stand, if I up the forecast artificially and it's wrong, that will then hurt me in my career as a management consultant. And this is my specialty. And he is like, "What do you think the consequence will be if you don't?" And I said, "I'm willing to accept that consequence." And was that the right thing to do in the moment? I don't know, but I went back to the fundamentals, like, who am I? I don't wanna BS a forecast and then cost my client, my customer, a lot of money, and it's gonna hurt them on Wall Street. Like, I just don't feel good about this. So I said no. And 2 of the partners, a week or 2 later, they took me in a conference room and they said, "We gotta let you go." And they didn't cite that as the reason, of course, because they couldn't do that. But it was directly related, and that was pretty unfortunate. But what I learned is that it doesn't matter who's pressuring you, or if you're like the newest consultant, you're just out of grad school and they're the partners at the firm, like that delta doesn't matter. You have to stick to your moral compass. And if it feels bad, do what you think is right, because no one's ever going to nail you for sticking to your core values. No one's ever going to be able to not hire you in the future because you did the right thing. But if you do the wrong thing, those same partners might say, "That wasn't us, that was this guy. And we're going to let him go because he's a bad forecaster." So it was a tough one for me. That one still hurts. But the things I learned have paid dividends for a very long time afterwards. And when I've been in similar difficult ethical or moral situations, I just go back to my internal compass and like, is this who I am? If it's yes, then okay. And if it's no, it's a hard no. And I'll figure out how to deal with whatever that consequence is.
I love this. I literally just put out a podcast on this very thing, that true leadership is built in the dark. It's
Yes.
what you do when no one's looking. It's how you hold yourself to high standards. It's how you hold yourself to your values. And I am a leader that is like, I always do the right thing. This is from a personal example, but I don't have a good relationship with my dad. And he left when I was really young, in and out of my life. He's very religious, and I am getting a divorce. And I didn't want to tell him I was getting a divorce because we don't even have a relationship that is that close. He's met my ex-husband a couple of times. We're not like, we're not family. Like, my son calls him Dave, right? Not even grandpa.
Mm.
But he was going to send some Christmas gifts. And so I had him send it to the old address. And I was like, this is not right. I don't have to pretend that me getting a divorce is wrong or bad
Yeah.
or immoral or any of those things that he might think, and modify myself and not do what's right because I don't want to deal with his judgment, which was basically it. And so I decided to tell him, "Hey, Dad, just want you to let you know, Ryan and I are splitting up. I'm doing great. We just, the relationship has run its course." And he didn't reply to me for months and never even actually acknowledged it. My friend, who is very protective, was like, "You didn't owe him that. Why did you do it?" And I said, "I didn't do it for him. I did it for me." I said, the right thing is not pretending that I still live at another address, because I don't want to have a conversation with my dad about this. And yes, he doesn't deserve to know. He hasn't earned the right to judge my life, to say anything about my choices, or even to have information about my life. But that is not how I live. I want to always do the right thing where I feel authentic, and I'm living by my values. And so that's why I did it. But it's in those moments when you cut those corners, when you say, okay, well, I'm going to compromise this time, that we start that slippery slope.
Mm.
And it's so important to always do the right thing. Now, always doing the right thing might get you fired, right? It might be a decision that has serious consequences. And in the moment, what you think might be right maybe isn't right. But if you are in alignment with your values and you can look at yourself in the mirror saying, I do the right thing all the time, even when I don't want to, integrity is built. It's how leadership is built. And it's in those moments when no one else sees that you are building that true leadership, like being a leader worth following.
I could not agree more. So what you said, it resonates with me because I also have a somewhat complicated relationship with my father. And somebody pretty recently was like, "How many entrepreneurs do you know that don't have that?" And I was
Yeah.
like, wow. And we rattled off a couple of like the hero entrepreneurs that we all know and love. And we were like, whoa, this is a pattern, right?
Right.
Maybe for me, it's like the need for my dad to be proud of me. And
Yeah.
he
To
doesn't
prove
see what
yourself.
I do. Like
Yes.
it doesn't matter. Is he going to listen to this podcast? I don't know how. Why do we do it to prove it to dad? But for me, that's where it comes from. I want him to
Mhm.
be proud of me if he ever looks it up, but I'll take the motivation.
My dad told me I wasn't smart enough to graduate from engineering school, and it is what made me stay at Colorado School of Mines. which I am so grateful for, even though it caused all kinds of issues in my life. I didn't live my life for me. I lived my life for other people, but I'm super grateful that I stuck out mines. And I wouldn't have done it if I wouldn't have had his voice in the back of my head going, "You're not smart enough to do this,"
Yeah.
and wanting to prove him wrong. It's an interesting dynamic, that childhood trauma that we get from absent parents or abusive parents. My dad wouldn't say abusive to me, but just completely dismissive
Mm.
of me. It's totally motivated my success, and I'm super grateful for it. And I'm glad that I've done the work, that I understand it and I don't let it dominate my life anymore. But when we're in our teens and our 20s and we're just trying to figure out who we are and why we exist
Yeah.
and what we're supposed to do with our lives, yeah, it can be motivating and it can be damaging all at the same
Oh,
time.
yeah, absolutely.
All right, this has been super fun. If people wanted to find you and learn more about what you're doing, how would they find you?
Yeah, I'm a big LinkedIn user, so I'm at Kyle Ewing on LinkedIn. I write a newsletter on LinkedIn called Ideas to Empires, which I hope brings some value. That's the primary way I like to connect is through LinkedIn or through email. My thought on connecting with people is like when you
Yeah.
add them, send a note and don't say something generic. Oh, love that you went to DU, go Pioneers. Everybody says that. Don't
Yeah.
say something inauthentic when you send that connection request. Say something that you care about. Say, hey, I'm interested in this. And if that's the only thing you say, I'm like, accept. Well, I love the people that just they know who they are, they're confident in that, and they make a request and they're like, "Hey, I heard you on the podcast. I got some value out of it." Cool. I love that kind of thing. That's great. That's the best way to get engagement, not just from me, but from anybody. Versus, hey, I'd love to set up a time to pick your brain. I don't know if you get this a lot, but pick your brain just pisses me off
Yeah.
because I'm like, it's just free advice and I've got a lot of constraints on my time. And yes, I would
Yeah.
like to help you, but I want it to be a different format somehow. And so, like, the way that I would change that is, hey, Terry, need some help with this. Is that something you can help me with? And then I'm like, "Psh, absolutely. I got you, bro.
Yes.
Whoever, I'm happy to help that person and I
Yeah.
get the best results. So, like, when you reach out to anybody on LinkedIn, send them a note, ask them what you need help with, and give them that opportunity. They might not all respond, but give yourself the best chance you can.
I love it. It's such great advice. And I am so with you. I get all of those as well. I want to pick your brain. Like, no, I am so busy. I don't know who you are and I don't have the time to go dig in. But yeah, when people say I have this issue, it just literally happened a couple of weeks ago. Somebody made a comment on one of the articles that I wrote on LinkedIn. And he said, "I'm really struggling with this area. Does anybody who left comments ever experience this?" And I said, "Oh, yeah, I've experienced this all the time." And now I'm going to be consulting with him and helping him and his partner with his business in a really cool industry that is adjacent to Stone Age. And it's like this total win win. He wasn't even really just asking me for it, but it was that engagement, that back and forth and connection. It was so cool.
Dude, I love that. And that, oh man,
I know.
I love that. And
Yeah.
the other thing that I would love to add is say I'm trying to get to Mrs. K about a thing. Instead of saying, Mrs. K asked the question, I can say, Mrs. K, do you know anybody that could help me with XYZ? Because it's the indirect ask that will get you the reply because you're not trying to just take something from them for free. Hey, who do you know that might be able to help with this? Either they'll refer you to the right person or they might just help you.
Yeah, totally. Such great advice. All right. Last question. The name of this podcast is Reflect Forward. What does Reflect Forward mean to you?
Man, reflect forward for me is about gratitude, appreciating the moment, and appreciating the people around you. Like the people at your company, your family, those are the people that as entrepreneurs, we don't thank enough. And those are the people that support us. Like those are the people that are around us every day that see the good, the bad, and the ugly versus everybody else sees the hero story. You get to see below the veneer and behind the curtain. Like reflecting forward to me is taking a moment each day to appreciate somebody and send them a note, send them a text. My favorite one to do is just like to pull out my phone when I'm feeling the moment and say, hey, I just want to tell you XYZ was super helpful. I can't believe how much effort you put into that. That made mountains of progress for us. And I appreciate that. So, reflect forward for me is show a little bit of gratitude to somebody every single day because A, it will make their day. And B, it feels good. It'll make your own day.
Ah, Great answer. So different than how anybody else has answered it. And I've heard hundreds of answers. And I love it that you just made it about other people. You are such a cool human being. And I'm so glad that I got to meet you.
Likewise, this has been so much fun. Thank you for having me on the show.
Wonderful. All right, we'll wrap up. Hang tight, everybody. I'll be right back. All right, everyone. I hope you enjoyed that interview. Such a interesting business. I love, love, love all the business ideas that are out there and watching people and learning from people who are building cool companies and cool cultures, especially in weird industries like Stone Age, right? We're in industrial cleaning, this super niche industry where we do really hard things that most people know nothing about, but the supply chain wouldn't work without our products. And it's fun to do hard things and be in maybe what would be considered boring industries. So, anyway, all right, I will leave you to your day. I hope you have a fantastic one. If you like this podcast, please share it with a friend, write a review, go onto YouTube and subscribe to it, go onto your favorite podcast platform and subscribe to it. It helps with the algorithms, and I appreciate it so much. Take care, and we'll see you next week.